Foreign tourists are entitled to be baffled. The Tower of London, the crown jewels guarded by diminutive mercenaries from a distant shore.
Halt! Halt! Who comes there?
The keys.
Whose keys?
Queen Elizabeth's keys.
Pass Queen Elizabeth's keys all world.
The grammar may be somewhat quaint, but the Gurkhas don't fight on syntax. Their legendary ferocity is matched only by their loyalty to our monarch.
God preserve Queen Elizabeth!
Aye.
Their distant homeland is enshrined in stained glass at the Sandhurst Military Academy. The real thing is a noble mountain in the Annapurna range of the Himalayas. Nepal, spectacularly beautiful, pitifully impoverished. This is the Gurkha Heartland, and to be born male here is to face a life of peasant drudgery. But there's one escape route. Boys like this, already toiling in the rice fields, will be among the many thousands who will compete to take it. It is to join the British Army. This is what they dream of and literally are prepared to die for. Ironically, in a changing world, their chances are becoming slimmer. Another Gurkha regiment, this time the 7th Duke of Edinburgh's own Gurkha Rifles, is being stood down. The grief is evident. These are fighting men, many of whom would have chosen to fall in battle rather than be neutered by political defence cuts. But the backs remain ramrod straight as the kukris, half knife, half sword, are sheathed for eternity. It's a royal occasion. Prince Philip arrives to take the valedictory salute to the regiment that bore his title. Soldiers whose battle honours were redolent with wild bravery and unquestioned sacrifice. More than 200,000 Gurkhas fought for Britain in the First World War. 20,000 were killed or injured. In World War II, some 250,000 took on the Germans at Tobruk and Monte Cassino and the fanatical Japanese in the Far East. They suffered 23,655 casualties. Most men are marching into oblivion. 4 Gurkha regiments have been concertinaed into one, 2/3 of their number jettisoned. Yet courtesy prevails with the traditional floral farewell to Prince Philip, an anomaly explained by George MacDonald Fraser, novelist and military historian who fought alongside them in Burma.
That was the curious thing
in
about
the
it.
Stone Age was going to be a pushover, dozily compliant. No sooner had its population risen than it was ready to go to bed again. It was a desperate misjudgment. Bloated from steamrolling a huge subcontinent, they encountered the men from Gorkha, from which the Gurkhas take their name, uninformed that its inhabitants regarded war as sport. From this tiny mountain fort, the Gurkhas, led by Pirti Narayan Shah, had swooped into the valleys to occupy 700 frontier miles, harass India and invade Tibet. The advance of the British Army didn't bother them at all. The clashes were probably unique in military history in that the British were soon to abandon their disparagement of native troops. The Battle of Kalunga, heavily outgunned, the Gurkhas fought almost to the last man.
Chin up.
Okay.
Today's Gurkhas, to a man, come from the same Himalayan terrain, so barren and without future that recruitment into the British Army is the ultimate prize. So fierce is the competition that candidates have to submit to the indignity of being branded like cattle, albeit with indelible ink. This is to prevent the unsuccessful leapfrogging to the next recruitment outpost and applying again under a totally different name. Major Gordon Corrigan explains the qualities they're looking for.
I suppose what we're looking for is physical and mental robustness, flexibility, intelligence, loyalty. It's actually quite easy to find those qualities amongst the Gurkhas because their own society is hierarchical. It's a society where respect is automatically given to elders, to parents.
492, 6.
Gurkha children do what their father tells them to do. Sadly, in our society, we stopped doing that a long time ago.
Next.
It's a society where you are thrown back very much on yourself. There is no welfare state. A natural disaster is ever present. Earthquake, landslide, hailstorms, flooding, fire. Nobody is there to bail you out. You're thrown back on your own resources. And this produces a tough society. It produces a fatalistic society. Fatalism, if you're an infantry soldier, is a good thing to have because it means you don't worry too much about being shot. You are going to be shot or you aren't. And it is better to be shot gloriously and have your name live on down the generations than it is to stay at home or to run away.
Go! Good one.
For almost 100 years, the Gurkhas never fought outside India. But the 20th century was to bring two world conflicts. In the first, a plea from General Sir Ian Hamilton for them to help out at Gallipoli.
I am very anxious, if possible, to get a brigade of Gurkhas, the type of man who will, I am most certain, be most valuable on the Gallipoli Peninsula. The scrubby hillsides on the southwest faces of the plateau are just the sort of terrain where these little fellows are at their brilliant best. Each little Gurkha might be worth his full weight in gold at Gallipoli.
Just number 452.
Gallipoli 1915 was a blood-chilling disaster. Thousands of Allied troops died, and senior heads rolled, including that of Hamilton himself. In a bitter disclaimer, he had praise for only one body of soldiers.
It is Sir Ian Hamilton's most cherished conviction that had he been given more Gurkhas in the Dardanelles, then he would never have been held up by the Turks.
Next. Chest number 2058.5.
Selection tests for candidate Gurkhas have hardly changed down the years. Even here, back in 1928, supply outweighed demand. The only difference then was the preservation of the top knot, the sprout of hair by which a stricken Gurkha's god could haul him into some Nepalese Valhalla. Some eccentricities have always been acknowledged, such as a Gurkha's problem about running from A via B to C in straight lines.
Once you come to this sort of flat area for running side, I think they got a problem because they don't have such a sort of a good piece of land out here to do sort of a running in a flat area.
They can't work on the flat. They can only operate on
Or
hills.
they can operate quite easily on up and down side, but it's very difficult for them to do the sort of running or any sort of physical fitness on the flat area side.
धन्यवाद अब अर्को साललाई फेरि ट्राई गर्न पर्यो है ल थ्यांक यू भेरी मच भाइहरु धन्यवाद ल
It's a dispiriting moment for the unsuccessful. Just 6 are going through to the next processing stage, but for the losers it's back to boring old Annapurna along Nepal's M1, the ancient spice road leading to Tibet. They remain trapped in a time warp, where the solitary hotel is not exactly the Himalaya Hilton, and only the animals appear pampered. For a dry martini, read Horlicks. But there's more to this place than meets the eye, and the reason is this man, Tal Bahadur Pun, who left here many years ago to join the Gurkhas. When eventually he returned, it was with the conviction that education is the key to life. He'd had none, only picking up rudimentary reading and writing when he joined the army. He came home determined that the village school should be extended, saying, "He who is without education will finish last." His words, for an exemplary reason, carried weight. On June the 23rd, 1944, fighting with the 6 Gurkha rifles against the Japanese in Burma, he found himself alone after his section comrades had been killed. His citation reads,
Rifleman Tul Bahadur seized the Bren gun and, firing from the hip as he went, continued to charge on the heavily bunkered position in the face of the most shattering concentration of automatic fire directed straight at him. With the dawn coming up behind him, he presented a perfect target to the Japanese. He had to move 30 yards over open ground, ankle-deep in mud, through shell holes and over fallen trees. Despite overwhelming odds, he reached the house and closed with the Japanese occupants.
He killed 4 with his gun and 3 with his kukri. Still, the citation didn't tell it all. When relief finally arrived, this benign-looking gentleman acquired a flamethrower and incinerated a further 30 Japanese in a dugout. He regarded this as appropriate reparation. But there's something of which he is even prouder, which he insists on showing to the world. His VC carries influence with the Gurkha Welfare Trust, and by using it, he was able to install in his village a simple, communal water tap. Paradoxically, only a few steps distant, there flows this river, highly photogenic, but seriously polluted. Before the tap, every drop of drinking water had to be carried in from an uncontaminated source 8 miles away. The beauty of this place is sorely compromised by a poverty that the Welfare Trust strives to alleviate from limited resources.
Nepal is the 4th poorest country in the world. To give you an illustration of the deprivation, there's only 1 doctor to 20,000, a hospital bed to 1 to 9,000 people. There is no state welfare system, apart from primary school, which is now being extended up to secondary school. And therefore, without an insurance scheme, without any welfare scheme, any hardship means that people become destitute, they can lose their homes and all means of livelihood. And therefore all our ex-servicemen, and indeed their dependents, look to us, the Gurkha Welfare Trust, to try and help them.
Our ancient Gurkhas fight for British Army bravely, so they give their life, but they don't give up their hands. So I think that's why this motto is given to Gurkhas. They don't give up till their life will go.
They don't give up till they die. He's also well acquainted with the Gurkhas' motto, even in English.
It is better to die than to be a coward.
This man is a Sherpa yak herder from the foothills of Everest. Not many Sherpas have Gurkha ambitions, so his main concern is how his family will react if he fails.
यदि भर्ती लागेन भने घर फर्किँदाखेरि आमा बाबाहरू है मन दुखाउनुहुन्छ कि अथवा तिमीलाई गाली गर्छ कि
गाली गर्छ त्यो त गाली गर्छ मन दुखाइ
Yes, his parent will be upset, and I think they will be quite angry as well, he thinks.
He's laughing now, but it's a serious matter. There are many Nepalese who regard being turned down by the Gurkhas as a disgrace on the entire family. Some rejects don't even go home again.
Yes, he will be quite afraid, but even so, then he must go back to his village.
The last lap to acceptance is rigorous and literally rock-strewn. A squad of Gurkhas once competed in a London marathon and finished hardly out of breath. It was a Sunday stroll compared with this. The competition is daunting. 57,000 initially applied to join the Gurkhas this year. 700 have reached this stage. Eventually just 153 will be chosen. The burden here is 45 pounds of stones. Tomorrow it will be increased to 75. Some find it disturbing that the elite of each generation leave to serve a foreign army. But not John Cross, an ex-Gurkha colonel who went back to live in Nepal and lectures at Kathmandu University.
What we don't do is we don't go into the mountains of someone else's country, take a fellow by the nose and say, you're going to be our soldier. It's entirely their volition. And whether it's hardship or the sense of adventure or because they can't get their act correct in their own country is of no concern to the recruiter who wants what he knows is good material. And if a Nepali, a high-ranking Nepali, for instance, might think it's wrong to give people to another country to fight, to lose blood, I can only tell you what Pandit Nehru, in his wisdom in the early 50s, said when the Indian Lok Sabha said, why should we have our country used as a passageway for these mercenaries going to the dreadful British Army, etc. And Pandit Nehru said, until the Nepalese can give as high a standard in Nepal to the people the British recruit, until that happens, I will let them through.
The 700 candidates have been whittled down to 400 and the tension is palpable. This is prize day, but for fewer than half of them. The final selection process is conducted outside the Gurkhas' compound. This is to thwart any remonstrance by rejects who feel they've been unfairly treated. The winners might have come up in the national lottery, which, when their indelible markings have been verified, they have. They can't wait to get in. A few rip off their coats or cheap wristwatches to give to a less fortunate friend. The British Army will now provide. By Nepali standards, they're now rich, insulated for life against everything except the winds of war. They will have fine uniforms and civilian clothes, good food, medical attention, and after 15 years, a pension. The passing into the compound is itself symbolic. Acceptance into an exclusive club festooned with battle honours renowned for bravery. A few of the rejected can rustle up that no hard feelings look. Well, maybe next year. Inside there is frantic, in some cases perplexing activity, writing farewell notes to the relatives they won't see for at least 3 years. They don't spring from an acquisitive society, but if they believed in Christmas, this would be Christmas Day. Off come the battered thongs, to be replaced by kit that for many will be the first words of English they'll ever speak.
Shoes Highlander, hey?
Shoes Highlander. Shoes Highlander.
Vest PT Green. It can now be a puzzling world. There is, for example, the ultimate challenge of new technology, the shoelace. Everything is an exciting discovery, but can they imagine what lies ahead?
It will change my life because we will get something from British Army and we will serve them. I'll help my family from poverty.
What does he expect England to be like? What does he hope to see there?
I think England is a very big city, big country. There are big city. I like to see that cities. And I like to see that big buildings. In Nepal we don't have that kind of building. So I like to see that.
The yak man already knows everything about England.
विकसित नै ठाउँ छ धेरै नै विकसित ठाउँ छ
He says England is a too development country, and he says it's very cold places.
Just what you'd expect from a chap who comes from Everest. Is there anything he wants to see?
यस्तै प्रातः लाउड सम्बन्धी अब यस्तै देखिन्छ होला
He says that he would like to see the how is in the England the animals, what kind of animals are there. Saudis, yaks, milk is made up by yak's milk.
In case English restaurants don't come up to scratch, he's brought his own food. Yak's milk cheese, hard as marble, though it doesn't taste as good. Old Army sweats will notice something missing here. No bawling, screaming, or obscenity on the barrack square. There's a warm affinity between NCOs and men. The reason is that the men don't need to be motivated. They already are.
First time when I reached to training depot, and my section commander was there, but I didn't know. And he called me up in a bad language. And I was like, surprised, yeah, really surprised. What sort of people are here? Who even don't know how to speak to the people. That is my accent.
All the section commander, they used to talk rude words. That I know that word. That's why. No exciting.
Rude words?
Yeah.
Why do you think they did that?
Because if they call, if they don't use rude words, they cannot. They cannot make soldier from the civilian.
Equally, the British officers have to adapt to native Gurkha attitudes and customs. There's no place for patronising haughtiness.
Full nudity when you're washing it is not tolerated at all. The boys, in fact, probably wash all the time with their swimming trunks on. You never point at anyone at any time. If you're pointing, you have to use your thumb. Or if you're pointing, someone asks you where something is, you'll see a lot of the Gurkhas pointing with their chin. Depending on how close or far away that is, if they're far away, they'll make a big gesture with their chin, and if they're close, they'll just jerk their head in their direction. There are other ones. You would never ever touch any of your soldiers' necks or shoulders, because they believe that in Nepalese tradition, if you touch someone else's neck or shoulders, then you'll make them be ill. They'd probably get a goiter or something growing on their neck. If you do inadvertently touch someone's neck, or have to for a reason, to get rid of the evil spirit that you've put into them, you have to blow on your fingers. Just a quick blow on your fingers afterwards.
At the end of their basic training, a pandit administers the oath of allegiance. They're mercenaries, they have a king of their own, and yet there's no more solemn moment in their lives. I swear I will be faithful and bear allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, her heirs and successors, in person and with dignity against all enemies. I will obey all orders of Her Majesty and of the generals and officers set over me. And they mean it. Under an aquiline stare, they are to come face to face, albeit by photograph, with the person to whom they have pledged their very lives. A few weeks ago, many of them were unaware even that the British monarch was a woman. They touched the Union flag in endorsement of their oath. Who knows what history has in store for them? One young Gurkha couldn't suppress a nervous giggle. He was brusquely admonished. But they do have a sense of humour.
A Gurkha would rather laugh than eat. Oh, that was the impression that we got. Most of them used to carry catapults, and they would hide. And as you went by, they would snipe you with their catapults. And if you shouted, "Idaro, Johnny, I can see you," you know, the little head would come out giggling, and he would hold up his catapult as much as say, "This is what I did it with," you know, as if you didn't know. And you couldn't take offence. I mean, you just couldn't. It would have probably been very dangerous apart from anything else.
Back home, 3 square meals a day were a mirage. Now, this is the Savoy without the bill. On average, in the first year of training, each recruit grows 1.5 inches and puts on a stone, none of it fat. If you find the finger habit mildly off-putting, remember that they've only just got to grips with shoelaces. Knives and forks are on the agenda, but not yet. Anyway, it was only the other day, 1611 in fact, that knives and forks were introduced to England. But why are these men prepared to die for the British crown? It's simple, he says. We've eaten your rations. We've eaten your salt. The obligation is binding. Obviously, there are times in a soldier's life when room service is not available. For example, the Burma jungle in 1944, when the Japanese were being extremely tiresome. So for a while it was grilled beetles garnished with imagination. Their colonel-in-chief has suffered similar indigestion.
I've never forgotten on one visit in Hong Kong. They were on an exercise in one of the sort of junglier parts of Hong Kong, where I was then invited to come and have lunch with them, I think, in the jungle. And I then found myself being given snake, which actually was one of the more disgusting things I think I've ever eaten.
They sleep on the floor because they always have. And unacquainted with EastEnders, Cilla Black or other icons of British culture, they spend their evenings singing songs about Himalayan mountains or hacking people's heads off. Local parents, others if they can afford the journey, drop into Pokhara for the farewells. There are also some enterprising young ladies. A Gurkha, even if he is off to Britain for the next 3 years, is a pretty good catch. But for some, the partings are the worst part of any adventure. Will he ever see his father again? Almost certainly, which is more than can be said for some of the rejected candidates down the years. Their sense of shame was so great that they came to this sinister bridge and threw themselves into the river below. They've now constructed anti-suicide nets. This is the Lee-Enfield Mark VI muzzleloader. Its cartridges were the problem, allegedly for being sealed with paper contaminated by cow grease. David Harding is an ex-Gurkha and Bisley champion.
The cartridge for the new rifle was greased at the bullet end. Inside this end of the cartridge there was a bullet of this shape. In this end there was enough powder for one shot. In the process of loading, the sepoy had to bite open the powder end with his teeth so that he could pour the powder into the muzzle. He then reversed the cartridge, pushed the bullet end in, tore off the empty part of the paper and rammed the bullet into the bore. And in the process of biting that cartridge, he would have come in closer contact than he cared for with the grease on the bullet end. The grease was, the rumour was, that it was composed of the fat of pigs and of cows. And the fat of pigs would have been objectionable to the Muslim sepoys, and the fat of cows would have been very objectionable to the Hindu sepoys. And contact with it, especially for higher caste Hindus, could cause serious loss of caste itself, and could cause social ostracism back in the home village.
The British government said, well, get your own grease. But high caste Indians were not to be mollified. They were itching for a fight, believing that the British were crushing their own cultures throughout the land. But the cow grease rumours still persisted. 150 years later, no such taboo was to deflect the young Gurkhas from the obvious venue for their first public meal in Britain. Burger, beef, one.